Hello and welcome back to my channel. So this video is a little different because we're not going to write any JavaScript or React. Instead, we're going to write CSS to build a website. Now before we go any further, let me tell you that this lesson is not about fancy CSS properties or animations. It's more about learning the tools that you need as a front-end developer in today's day and age. So we will learn how to use Sass or SCSS, how to organize our CSS code using the Bem or BEM methodology, and we'll also learn how to split our code into separate modules so it's easier to manage. So this is what we'll be designing in this video. It's a fully responsive website for a fictional web design agency. We're not going to use any third-party shit like Bootstrap, just a good old pure CSS and Sass. So I've tried to keep the design pretty minimal because that's the trend these days. As you can see, plenty of white space and flat colors. And we're going to design this whole thing from scratch. You don't really need much experience with CSS. As long as you know the basics such as margin, padding, and positioning, then you are good to go. Although we will make heavy use of all these techniques while building this website. So if you're somebody that's just getting started with HTML and CSS, then this is going to be a great next step. Right, so without any further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, so to get started, we do need just a couple of files. So go to this link, go to this link right there, and I will add this in the description as well. So once you're here, go ahead and clone or download this repository by clicking this green button, and you can just click on this download zip. And once you've done that, open this folder, and for me it's on my desktop, and there's not much to look at here. It's just a folder that contains the image that we're going to use for the project, and then is this index.html file, and this just contains the bare bones HTML markup that we need. So if I open this file, you can see that it's this disgusting skeleton, but we are going to transform it in the next hour or so. Okay, so that's for the files. Now let's go ahead and set up our project. So I do apologize if you are not too familiar with the terminal, but we kind of need to use it in this case. Otherwise we won't be able to do anything. So go ahead and open this project in your terminal. The easiest way to do is to copy the path, just like that. And then in the terminal, paste it, press enter, and there we go. Now, first of all, you need to make sure that you have Node.js installed on your computer. If you don't, go to this website right there and download and install the LTS version, which basically means long-term support. Okay, and it's an easy installation. It's just going to ask you to do a few steps, and that's it. So Node.js gives you access to NPM or Node Package Manager. If you don't know what this means, then you might need to Google it for details because explaining NPM is beyond the scope of this lesson. But essentially, it allows you to install stuff that you need for your project. So now we need to type this command here, npm init. So if you press enter, it's going to ask you a few silly questions that no one really cares about. So you can just enter your way through them. I'm going to change the name of this project to just CSS Workflow because these are no longer the starter files. So CSS Workflow, and then you can carry on pressing enter. You can add your name here if you like. I'm just going to add mine, and there we go. And that's it. So now we are ready to install the packages that we need. In fact, we only need one package, and that package is called Node Sass. So to install a package with npm, you type npm install node -sass. This command is going to install a package called Node Sass, and Node Sass is a package that allows us to compile Sass code to normal CSS code that the browsers can understand. So at this point, I realize that this is all a bit abstract right now, especially if you don't know about NPM or the terminal. But for now, please just follow along with me, and we will explore all these topics in details in just a little bit. Okay? So now to install this package, we need to press enter, and it might just take a minute or two. There we go. So now let's go ahead and open this project in a code editor, and I'm using VS Code. So there we go. And here we have a few more things. We have a package.json file and the node modules. So this package.json file contains the packages that we install, and the code for the installed packages lives in this node modules folder. And to be honest, this is irrelevant. You almost never touch this folder. It's just there for the project basically. We never touch this folder. So now, thanks to this package.json file, we can use the node Sass package. But before we can do that, we need to create a command that we can run through the terminal, and it will then convert the Sass code into normal CSS. So here, within the scripts object, let's get rid of this test because we don't need it. So now let's open up a pair of quotes, and in here type dev. Now this dev is the name of the command that we're going to run through the terminal. So you can call it anything, okay? It can be banana or a horse. Honestly, it doesn't matter what it is. So I'm going to change this back to dev because it's a bit more relevant. And after that, I'm going to type a colon and then open up another pair of quotes. Now, whatever follows this colon is what's going to happen when you run this command. So within this pair of quotes, type node hyphen Sass, and that's the name of the package. And now we need to specify the file and the folder that this command needs to watch out for the Sass code. In my case, I'm going to write all my Sass code in a folder called styles and then in a file called styles.scss. So let's type this, styles/styles.scss. And then we need to type the path for the file and the folder where all the compiled code is going to go. And that's going to be in a folder called css / and then the file is called styles.css. And to avoid running this command over and over again every time we make a change, we can add a watch flag by typing -w. And with this in place, our project is almost ready. One last thing we need to do is we need to install an extension called Live Server. So go to your extensions manager, type live. For me, it's the second one, but you need to look for an extension called Live Server. I've already installed it, but if you haven't, then here it's going to say install instead of uninstall. So this extension is going to show you a live preview of your web page and update it in real time every time you save a file. So once you've installed it, open up your command palette by pressing Command Shift and P. And here you need to look for a command called open with live server. And if you enter, then this is going to launch this project in a live server. As you can see, this is the name of the server, or the port rather. And there we go. Our project is pretty much ready. Now, if you are not using VS Code, then you can just install this live server package on your computer. Type npm install live server -g. So if you press this, this command is going to install this live server package globally on your computer. And then once you've done that, type live server staying within your project folder and press enter. And as you can see, it's going to open up your project in a live server as well. Only for me, it's running through the code editor, but for you, it's just going to reload it every time you make a change. Okay, so now our project is in place and we are ready to write some code. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So first of all, let's explore Sass. So Sass is a preprocessor for CSS, meaning it gives CSS some superpowers. So let me show you what I mean. First things first, we need an element to work with. So to get started, we are going to begin with the hero section of the web page. So it's this one right there. Right now it looks like this, but we're going to make it look like that. Okay, so this hero section has a class called hero, and to add styles to it, we first need to create those two folders that we specified in our dev command right here. So the first folder was called styles, and within there we've got a file called styles.scss. And this is the file where all our Sass code is going to live. And then we need to create a folder called CSS. And within this folder, we are not going to actually create this styles.css file because the dev command is going to generate it for us as soon as we run it through the terminal. So let's go back to the terminal and type npm run dev. Press enter. Now you may notice that it's kind of just hanging in the middle, and this is because this W flag in the command is keeping an eye on our styles folder where we write our Sass code. So as soon as we make any changes in there, it's going to automatically compile everything for us. So just to test that it is working, let's open up our styles.css file, this one right there. Let's give our level 1 heading a red color, so h1, and here let's say color red. Now as soon as I save this file, it's going to create a new file in this CSS folder. So press save, and now if I open this file, you can see that a styles.css file is there, and we did not create it. It came through this npm run dev command, and you can even see that it found the changes and it saved it automatically. And you can see that this file contains the exact same code that lives here. It's pretty simple at the moment, but as we get into Sass, it's going to get more and more complicated. But here you are going to see the simplified version of everything that we write inside of our Sass files or SCSS files. Okay, so at this point I realized that all we've done so far is the configuration work and very little coding. But trust me, we are completely ready to start designing our website now. So as you can tell, we have different sections across our web page. And we could totally write the code for all these sections in the one single file that we have here. But that defeats the purpose of this lesson, in that we want to stay as organized as possible. So within the styles folder, let's create a new folder called modules. There we go. And in here, let's create a new file called _hero.scss. The underscore is there because this file is considered a partial in Sass. So now here we can maybe declare a color for every element in the hero section. So let's say .hero, and then color, give it a nice ugly blue. Press save, but it's not going to do anything just yet. Now the question is, how do we import this code into our main styles.css file? Well, we can actually use the Css Imports. So let's get rid of this heading and say @import. And within the quotes, we need to specify the path that's relative to this file. So for me, it's ./modules, and then it's hero, and then a semicolon. Now you can see that it did not use the underscore here. This is because Sass treats this file as a partial. Let's open this file in our CSS folder, and we can see that nothing has changed, only now the color is blue. So we can see that our import has worked. But this is not going to work in the web browser. Why? Because we still need to include this styles file in our index.html file. Okay, so here, let's say link, and then the relative path again. So for me, it's ./CSS and then styles.css. So now if I press save, look back in the web browser, we can see that this beautiful, well, ugly blue color is there. So everything is working as expected, and this is great. So let's go back to the code editor. And do you know how before starting every CSS project, you declare a few properties that are going to affect everything on the web page? We are going to do that here too. So in this styles folder, I'm going to create a new folder called base. And now within this folder, I'm going to create a new file called _global.scss. Excellent. And this is where we're going to write the styles that affect everything on the web page. So first of all, let's select everything with the asterisk sign, and in here, set the margin to 0, set the padding to 0, and then the box sizing to body box. Okay, now let's open up a tag for the HTML and set the global font size to 62.5%. And why did we do that? Because we want to use this as base for our rem units. Now in the body tag, set the font weight to 400 and the font size to 16 pixels. We had to declare these two font sizes because it's going to give us a nice space of 10 pixels to work with the rem units. So one rem is going to equal to 10 pixels. Okay, so now let's go ahead and save this file, open up the styles and import the file before the hero module. So import, and then it's base, and then it's global. Be sure to add a semicolon. So now if I press save, I don't think it's going to make much difference, but there we go. So as you can see that the padding and margin, they are working because we reset them to 0. Okay, so I don't like this font, you know, all these serifs, and we're going to use a couple of different fonts throughout this web page. And I will be sure to add all the colors and the fonts that we need in the starter files for this project. So in the folder that you downloaded, there should be a file named settings.txt. This file contains the imports from Google Fonts, these ones right there. But what are those? These dollar signs and then these? Well, these are actually what's known as Sas Variables. And this is actually where we are going to learn about one of the first things about Sass, the variables. So let's create a new file in the base folder and call it _variables.scss. In here, let's copy everything from this dollar sign right till the end. In fact, let's cut it out and paste it within the variables. So as you can see that this Sass file instantly recognizes these variables. Now, why do we need variables? Well, what if we need to reference just one color over and over again in our project? Say this one, for example. We could just type this color code over and over again, but that's going to get very messy. Instead, we could just declare this variable once and then reference it anywhere within our web page. So let's go ahead and save this file, and then first of all import it in our styles folder above the global file. Okay, here import, and then it's base and then variables, the semicolon. So now we have access to all the variables that live inside of this file. To prove it, let's reference one of these variables inside of our global file. So here within the body tag, let's say font family, and set it to equal font number 1, which is this font right there. And that's actually the base font for our web page. So now here, if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can see that it's not working. And this is due to a bug in the Node Sass package. Every time you create a new file, you have to restart this command in order to view the changes in real time. So here, let's terminate this command and say npm run dev. Okay, so now if you go back to the editor, press save again, we can see the changes appearing here. But this is not quite the font that we wanted. I mean, the serifs have disappeared, but it does not look anything like this font, does it? I mean, this is the base font. It should look like this, but it looks like that. And this is because we haven't actually imported these fonts in our styles. So to do that, let's go ahead and cut this out, just like that. And then in the styles folder, above everything else, let's paste them there. So now if I press save, go back to the browser, we can see that it is starting to take some kind of a shape. So this also means that we are successfully compiling our Sass code into normal CSS. To do that, we can actually go to this CSS file here, and here you can see the font family is actually the font family that we are importing in our styles folder right there. But it is being compiled from the variable because remember, we referenced font 1, and it's being compiled to normal CSS, and this is why it's appearing like that here. Okay, so now we're actually ready to really shift our gears and start working on this website. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I don't like how all these elements are just crammed together in one little corner. I mean, there should be some kind of a wrapper that positions them nicely on the web page. So to do that, let's go ahead and create a new folder in our styles folder and call it layout. Okay, and I should tell you that the names of the folders are not important. I'm creating this layout folder because having a wrapper that wraps all our elements is part of the layout of the web page. So it's more about staying organized, and that's why I'm creating all these folders. You can call them whatever you like. Okay, so in this folder, I'm going to create a new file called _wrapper.scss. In here, let's open up a wrapper class, and then first things first, let's go to styles, and after the global file, but above the hero file, type import, and then it's layout, and then wrapper, and don't forget the semicolon. Okay, press save. Now in the wrapper file, let's first give it a margin right of auto, a margin left of auto, and then a max width of 1100 pixels. And now let's also give it a padding of 0 on top and bottom, and then 10 pixels on left and right. Now press save. So to save these changes, we need to wrap these elements within the wrapper. So inside of this index.html file, let's first cut out the contents of this hero element, like that, and let's say wrapper, and paste your clipboard. There we go. So now if I press save, look back in the web browser, we are not seeing the change, and this is because this wrapper was a new file, and to see the changes, we need to first restart this npm run dev command. Okay, so npm run dev. So now if I go back, save changes to any of these files, go back here, we can see that the wrapper has nicely centered the contents of the hero element, meaning the contents of this hero are centered within the web page, but to actually position them in the middle horizontally and vertically, we will have to add styles to our hero file, which lives right here. Okay, and that's exactly what we're going to do next. So first of all, let's get rid of this color. And in here, I'm going to make a few adjustments. So we want the content to be positioned in the middle, both vertically and horizontally. But we also want to give this entire hero section a height. So to do that, let's go back to our hero class, and here, let's set the height to 80 VH. This means that the height is going to span over 80% of the total height of the web page. Let me show you what I mean. Press save, go back to the browser, and you can see that the hero element has now a height. And if we set this to 100, just like that, you can see that it's going to take up 100% of the user's viewport, okay? And here's all the rest of the content. Okay, now let's go back to the code editor, position it back to 80, okay? And now to center these elements in the middle, we can use Flexbox. So first of all, let's set the display of this entire hero section to flex. So display, flex, and that's going to trigger all other Flexbox properties. And here we can say align items to center, justify content to center, and then finally text align to center. So now if I press save, go back to the web browser, we can see that all these elements are sitting nicely centered within the hero section, and that's exactly what we wanted. So now let's also give it a background image. So here in this hero section, right at the top, let's say background, and then URL, and then it's / image, and then it's this bghero.dark.jpg. And let's also position it to top, left, and then no repeat. So now if I press save, go back to the browser, you can see that it's there, but it's looking a bit dodgy. And this is because we need to add a background size property. and that's going to span it over the entire section of the hero page. And that property is called background size, and set it to equal color. So now if I press save, go back to the browser, you can see that it's spanning the entire width of the hero section. Okay, now if you look back in the original version, you can see that the text here is white for the most part, and there's also a dark color over this image, almost like a gradient. So for that, we can use the Css Linear Gradient property. So here, before the URL, let's say linear gradient, and then add a comma. So this is a function, and it takes two arguments. The first argument is the color, and here I'm going to use the RGBA, which in itself is a function, and this takes two arguments. The first argument is the name of the color, and the second argument is the opacity of the color. So here I'm going to use my main blue color. Remember, this is the variable that lives in our variable file. Okay, and the second argument is the opacity. So I'm going to set it to below 1. So 1 is the maximum opacity. I'm going to set it to 0.7. Okay, and here I'm going to copy it, because remember, this is the first argument. And the second argument is also this RGBA property. So let's add a comma and paste it across. So now if I press save, go back to the browser, you can see that the color is there. And now we just need to add the color to this text. So here, right at the bottom, we can say color, set it to equal white. Press save, and there we go. We can see that it is starting to come together nicely. Okay, so let's carry on working. So we're going to begin working on this piece of text, this level 1 heading. So let's take a closer look at what we are trying to achieve. A good way to approach this project is to act like that there is a designer who has designed this whole website in their design software. And now they want us to create this exact same website with code. So assuming that this is what our designer wants the text or the title to look like. So I can see two different fonts being used here. And also this hello there is almost as if it's behind this text and merged into it. So this is our task. Let's get to it. Okay, so back to the editor. In the index.html file, let's give this title a class. So there's h1 right there. And now is a good time to talk about the Bem Naming Convention. So Bem or BEM stands for Block Element Modifier, meaning we have to treat each section of the page as a block, which in this case is hero, and then everything within the block is the element of the block. So there can be a few exceptions, like this wrapper of course. This is just something that we're using to add a generic style to our page, so it's independent of this hero block. But this heading and the paragraph and the button, these are all elements of this hero block. Now to actually hammer down the fact that they are indeed the elements of this block, we're going to give them very unique class names. So to give this h1 a class, for example, we start with the name of the block, which in this case is hero. And then we add underscore underscore, and then whatever name we want to give to this title. Now you can call it anything like main heading or main title, but I'm just going to call it hero underscore underscore title. Now the same thing with this paragraph, this one right there. Let's give it a class and say hero underscore underscore subtitle. So now that we've got these names in place, let's go ahead and learn how to use them in our styles. So in this hero file, we're going to use another feature of Sass, which is nesting. This feature lets you add styles to a particular element while staying within the styling block of the parent element. Let me show you what I mean. Now to style this level 1 heading, it obviously lives inside of this hero block. So back in the hero file, usually we would say something like .hero underscore underscore title and then style it this way. But here, because it's a Sass file, we can actually use the nesting feature, which lets you add styles to a particular element whilst staying within the parent block. So in this case, the parent block is hero. Now here we can say ampersand underscore underscore title, and here we can add the styles. So this ampersand represents the parent, which in this case is hero. And now this underscore underscore title is actually the class that we gave to our heading here in the index.html file. Now, if we gave our heading a different class name, such as maybe header underscore underscore title, then this ampersand approach would never work. It works because this ampersand stands for the parent, which is the hero class. Okay, so let's get rid of that. And now, if it looks strange to you, don't worry. It's going to take some time before you get used to it. And we're going to use this approach so much in this video that I'm sure by the time we finish this website, you will be comfortable using this whole Bem architecture. Okay, so now to check that we have implemented the Bem architecture successfully, let's add a few styles to our title. So first of all, let's give this title a font family. And I'm going to go with font 3, which is actually the variable that lives inside of our variables file, and this is the font that we're giving to our title. Okay, let's also give it a font size of 8 rem, which translates to 80 pixels, and letter spacing of 2 pixels, and let's also give it a font weight of 400. Okay, press save, and now let's go take a look in the browser, and there we go. So taking a look at the original design, we can see that this hello there has a very light color, and this beautiful word right here is red, and also it has a different font size in that it's slightly bigger. So back in our HTML file, there is a line break between this hello there and the rest of the text because of this break tag right here. But we can also see that there are a couple of span elements. There's one right here, and then there's one right here. Now, you normally use span elements to style something within the text. Because span elements are inline elements by default, meaning they don't enforce a line break. So here, in the first span element, let's give it a class of hero underscore underscore title dash dash faded. Okay, so what is this double dash? This is actually the M in BEM, which stands for modifier. Now, what are we doing here? We're trying to modify certain parts of this text, this whole H1. And to do that, we're giving it a modifier by saying dash dash and then the name of the modifier, which in this case is faded. Let's also give this other span element a class of hero underscore underscore title dash dash red. Again, this is a modifier class because we want to turn this element red. Okay, so press save. Back in the hero file, within this title class, we can access the modifier class by saying ampersand dash dash faded. Okay. This works because we are already in a parent class, which in this case is hero underscore underscore title, and then this hero underscore underscore title is the parent of the modifier, and we represent the parent with this ampersand sign. And then to access the modifier, we use the name of the modifier, which we called faded. Okay, now let's also access the other modifier by saying ampersand dash dash red. Okay, now in this first modifier, because it's faded, we need to give it a color using the RGBA function. So here, let's say color, and then RGBA. Let's go with white, and then set the opacity to 0.25. Okay. Now this red one has a color, and the color is called main red, which is a variable that lives in our variables file. Okay. And this also has a different font. So let's say font family, and set it to equal font number 2. There we go. And also we need to change its style to font style to italic. There we go. Now if you save the file, take a look in the browser, we can see that it's kind of what we want, but not exactly what we want. Because if you take a look at the original file, here you can see that this hello there is much closer to the text, and then this beautiful word is slightly bigger in size. So back in the editor, we can adjust the line height so this hello there gets closer to the rest of the text. So here in the original title, we can say line height, and 1 is the default, so to reduce it, we can say 0.7. Now in this modifier, we need to increase its size, and we could totally use the font size property, but that's going to affect the rest of the text as well, meaning it's going to take it out of its natural flow. So we can use the transform property. So let's say transform. And then the scale property allows you to adjust the size. So we can say scale. Okay. And then the default size is 1. Let's bump it up to 1.2. So now if we press save, go back in the web browser, we can see that it is looking almost exactly the same as our original design. But you can see that this hello there is much bigger, and here it's much smaller. And also the positioning is different as well, but that's because this one might have a margin on either side, top and bottom. We will worry about that later on, but for now, let's go ahead and adjust the font size of this hello there. Okay, so again, we could totally use the font size, but I'm not going to do that because that might take it out of its natural flow. So we can actually just go ahead, copy this, paste it right here, and say maybe 1.3. Now let's go take a look in the browser, and it hasn't worked. And this is because this transform property only works on block or inline block elements. Now you may argue that this is also a span element, which is an inline, but you don't realize that this is the part of the original h1. Here is a break tag, so this kind of makes it a separate element of its own. So to do that, here in the faded class, we can set the display right at the top to inline block. Okay, so now if I press save, go back to the browser, you can see that the sizing is there. And now our title is looking exactly the way we want it to look, which is like that. So next, we're going to worry about styling this subtitle. So here in the HTML file, we already gave it a class of subtitle right there. Okay, so back in the hero file, outside of this title block, but within the hero block right here, we can access the subtitle by saying &_ __ subtitle. Okay, in here, I'm going to give it a font weight of 100. Want the font size of 3 rem, not the style, size, 3 rem. Okay, and I also want to adjust the margin. So 6 rem on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. So now if I press save, go take a look in the browser. It's looking good, but it could look better. So back in the editor, let's adjust the width to 60% because here you can see that it's much wider than it is in the original design. So back in the editor here, let's set the width to 60%. Okay. So now if we take a look in the browser, we can see that it's looking good, but now it has lost its center position due to the width. So let's go ahead and use the age-old method, which is margin auto on left and right. So here, instead of 0, let's say auto. Press save, and it's looking good for the most part, apart from the fact that it should be much wider in terms of its height. So we can adjust the line height, go back to the file. Here, let's say line height to maybe 2. Press save. Back in the browser, we can see that this part and this part is now complete. And it's looking pretty identical to what we have here. So now what we need to do is we need to style this button. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. So back in the editor, in the index.html file, here we have an anchor tag that basically acts like our button. Now, one thing I want to do before anything else is add a global style to all the anchor tags on this page. We only have one here, but it's just a good practice. So in this global file, below the styles for the body, we want to select all the states for an anchor tag, and those states are link, visited, hover, and active. So here, let's say A, and then the pseudo selector, which is link, and then visited, and then hover, and finally it's active. Now all I want to do here, I just want to get rid of the underline, which is this thing right there. So to do that, I can just say text decoration to none. Press save. Back in the browser, it's still there. And I'm pretty sure it's due to that npm run dev. So here, there we go, there's an error. It says that I might have typed a dot instead of a comma. So here, let's get rid of the dot and then press save again. Back in the browser, we can see that the underline is gone. I mean, I'm sure you can see that now. Right, okay, so now as for the actual button, we're going to style it in its own file. Because let's say that you have to use this button over and over again on your website with different colors and modifiers. So you would want all that code in a file that's dedicated to the button. So now back in the editor, here, I'm going to give this anchor element a class of its own, which is going to be independent of the hero section. Because remember, we're going to style this button separately in its own file. So here, let's give it a class and say button. Press save. And now to create a file, I'm going to use the layout folder. Because for me, a button is a part of the layout of the page rather than a module or a section. So here, let's say underscore button.scss. Right, so before we forget, we need to import this here. Import, and then its layout, and then its button, and the semicolon. Press save, and in here, let's open up a class of button. So we have a button there as well. Now, before we forget, let's rerun the command because whenever we create a new file, the node Sass package just doesn't recognize it. So Control-C to terminate the process. There we go. Okay, now back in the editor, here is where we're going to style the whole button. So let's take a look at what we're trying to achieve. So our designer wants the button to look like this. Okay, so it's uppercase, bold, this red color, and there's some border radius too, and then we hover it, it gets darker. So back in the button file, let's start with the background color. So background color, and I'm going to set it equal to our main red color right there. And give it a padding of 1 rem on top and bottom, and then 3 rem on left and right. Border radius of 3 pixels, and then font weight is going to be bold. Font size is going to be 2 rem, and finally text transform to uppercase. Press save. Back in the browser, in this file, it's not looking good, and this is because this should be padding, not pad. Press save, and there we go. Now, it's this weird color, it's still blue, but we want this to be white. So to fix this, we can say color inherit. What this is doing is inheriting the color from the hero file, because at the end of the day, this still lives inside of the hero block, even though it's not a part of it in terms of Bem, but it still is a child element of hero. So in the hero file, for example, we're giving it a color of white. So here, if we tell it to inherit, then essentially what we're doing is we're saying set the color to white, but inherit that from your parent element, which in that case is hero. Okay, so now let's take a look in the browser, and there we go. But it still looks a bit odd. I mean, the text is a bit crammed together here. It's a bit more relaxed, but this one just looks a bit, it doesn't look right. So let's see what we can do to fix that. So what I can see that it's got a bit more spacing between the letters, and here it's all crammed together. So back in the editor, let's say letter spacing and set it to equal 2 pixels. Let's see if that makes a difference. Yes, it does. But I think that we could do with a bit more vertical padding. So here, let's maybe bump it up to 1.3 rem. Let's see if that makes a difference. So what I notice now is that maybe there is a bit more gap between the button and then this text. So here, what we can do is we can say margin, top, set it to equal to rem, see if that works. And it has not worked. And this is because this anchor tag by default is an inline element. And margin is one of those properties that only works when the element is either block or inline block. So let's say here, display, and set it to equal inline block. And let's exaggerate the margin just so we know it's working. So now press save, back in the browser. There's a huge gap, but we don't want it to be that big. Let's set it to maybe 3 rem. In here, no, maybe 2 rem. Now let's compare these two files. That looks good, but I think maybe there is a bit of extra padding on left and right as well. So here, let's give it a padding of an extra 0.2. Okay, that looks good. Now, to make sure that this button turns red when we hover on it, let's head back to the button file in here. Now, to reference the parent, which is the button class, we can use the ampersand sign and then a semicolon and select the hover state. In here, let's set the background to dark red. Okay, press save, back in the browser, we can see that it is turning red, and that's perfect. So now we need to take a closer look of the rest of the layout, as in how we want to approach it. So we can see that there is a pattern in each of these sections, meaning there is padding on top and bottom, all these elements are nicely centered, and then these headings, they follow the same pattern. They have the uppercase text, which is this right there, and then a tiny light border there, and then there's a red subtitle, and finally there is space on left and right in each of these sections, but our wrapper takes care of it. So why don't we start with the layout element that's going to take care of the top and the bottom padding, as well as make sure that everything is nicely centered in the section. Okay, so let's go to our layout folder in here, and let's create a new file called _page section.scss, and then page section here. And first of all, let's import this right in our styles folder. So just below the button, let's say import, and then layout, and then section, and then semicolon. And also, I should have mentioned this earlier, but you may have noticed that there is no SCSS extension in any of these files that we have imported. This is because Sass is smart enough to know that these are all SCSS files, so there is no need to add the extension. You can, but honestly it does not matter. So press save, and now we need to restart the command in the terminal. So back in the terminal, let's terminate the process and then say npm run dev. There we go. Okay, so in our page section, we can set the padding of 8 rem of top and bottom, and then 0 on left and right. And then we can say text align to center. So now to see the changes, we need to apply this class to one of the sections. So since we're styling this about section, let's go ahead with that. So here, next to the about, let's give it another class called page section. And then let's also wrap these elements in our wrapper, okay? So wrapper, and then paste them here. Take a look in the browser, and there we go. This is exactly what we wanted to achieve. So now we are going to style this title. So this bit and that bit. Let's go ahead and do that. So if we look in the original design, we can see that we are using the same pattern for this title over and over again, meaning we should probably make it its own layout element. Okay, so in the editor, in the layout folder, let's create a new file called _section title.scss. Now in this file, we're going to add the styles for the title as well as the subtitle. So first of all, section title, and then section subtitle. Okay, now before we forget, let's import this file in our main styles. So in here, underneath the page section, let's say import, and then layout, and then it's section title, and don't forget the semicolon. Okay, let's close this file, close the hero, close the page section, and close the button as well. So now we also need to restart the terminal. So here, let's terminate the command and say npm run dev. There we go. Right, so now in the index.html file, let's give this level 2 heading the class of section title, and then I'm going to copy it, paste it here, and I'm going to add the word sub so it becomes subtitle. Okay, so now in this file, let's first set the color of the heading to main blue. So color, main blue, text transform to uppercase, letter spacing of 2 pixels, font size of 4 rems, font weight, we want it to be bold, and then a bottom padding of 3 rem because we want there to be some distance between the title and the subtitle. So let's press save, take a look in the browser, and we are making good progress. Okay, so now for the subtitle, we want a different font here. So let's set the font family to font number 2, which is this Merriweather font right here, and it lives in our variables.scss file. Okay, so now let's set the font style to italic, set the color to main red, set the font weight to 300 because we don't want this to be bold, and then the letter spacing of 2 pixels, and then the font size of 2 rem because we want it to be slightly smaller. So press save, take a look in the browser, and it's looking good, but one thing is missing, and that is the line between the title and the subtitle. This line right there. And we could totally use the bottom border or add an element in the HTML and then style it. But there is a more efficient way of doing it, and that is to use the CSS pseudo selector called before. Let me show you what I mean. So within the subtitle block here, let's select the subtitle using the ampersand sign, so here, and then the double colon, and then before. That's how you select a pseudo selector, and then this before is going to add what we tell it to add before the subtitle starts, okay? So what do we want? We don't want it to be a text or an image, so we can set the content to empty quotes. Then we're going to give it a height, width, and margin, and for that it needs to be a block element. So here let's set its display to block. Okay, now let's give it a height of 3 pixels, a width of around 70 pixels, just to experiment, and then we want it centered horizontally, and to do that we can set the margin of 0 on top and bottom and auto on left and right. And then the background color is faded red, which also lives in our variables file. Okay, and then finally we want a little spacing between this line and the actual subtitle, so we can say margin bottom, because remember this line is going to appear on the top of the subtitle. So let's set it to equal 3 rem. Let's save this file, take a look in the browser, and that looks good, but maybe we should make it a bit wider. So here let's adjust the width to 83 pixels roughly. Press save, back in the browser, let's compare it to the original design, and that looks identical, and this is great. So now we can use this style and the page section and the wrapper for all of our other sections on this page. And this is what's so great about staying organized. Having reusable components saves you a ton of time, and it makes your life 10 times easier. Next, we're going to style this paragraph, which again is going to be another reusable component, because if we check in the original design, we can see the same style of text being used everywhere in each of these sections, as you can see. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So back in the editor, let's first create a new file in the layout folder and call it underscore generic text.scss. Now let's open up the class. So generic text, press save. Now in our main file, let's import it right here. So import, and then it's layout, and then it's generic text, and then a semicolon. Okay, and we also need to refresh everything in the terminal. So here, let's kill the process, and then npm run dev. Right, so now in the HTML file, here in the about section, we need to give this paragraph a class of generic text. Okay, so now what do we want to do? So we want the text to be horizontally centered, and for that we're going to use the margin trick. So margin 0 auto, and then the letter spacing to 1 pixel, and then for the color we're going to use one of the variables that we have, and that one is para gray, which basically means a gray color for the paragraph. Okay, now let's also give it a font weight of 300, and then bump up the font size to maybe 2 rems, and finally a line height of 2.5. Now let's press save, take a look in the browser, and that looks good. But comparing it to the original design, we can see that the font size is much bigger. So maybe we could do it something like 4M. Let's give it a shot. Nope, that's too big. 3. That's maybe a bit too big as well. Let's try 2.5, see if that works. Okay, I'm happy with that. So the only thing left now is the spacing between the paragraph and the title. And we're actually going to take care of it in the section title file. So here, let's open that up. And then in this section subtitle, let's give it a margin bottom of 3 rem. Press save. Take a look in the original design, and we have to bump it up a bit more. So here, let's say maybe 4M. See if that works. Nope. Let's try giving it 7 rem just to exaggerate it. No, I think that's a bit too much. Let's leave it at 5. And that's good. I'm happy with that. So with that in place, our About Us section is done. Next up, we're going to look at the services section, and that's probably going to be the most challenging thing of this website, because here we're going to have to make it look like this. So let's go ahead and start doing that. Now for this services section, we are going to apply the wrapper, page section, and the title. So let's go ahead and start with that. In the HTML, let's give this services div another class of page-section. Okay, now let's cut everything out here and then wrap it within our wrapper. There we go. Press save, take a look in the browser, and it is working. Great. So for these titles, we need to give this the class of section-title. And then for this one is section, and then it's the subtitle. Okay, let's take a look in the browser, and there we go. So just by using a few classes that we already defined, we are able to achieve this basic layout for our section within just a couple of minutes. Okay, so now for the real thing, let's create a new file in our modules here and call it _services.scss. And now you know the drill, so add a class, save it in the file below the hero module. So modules, and then the services, and then the semicolon. And now we need to refresh everything in the terminal. So here it's npm run dev. Right, so first of all, let's give our HTML a few more classes, okay? So let's wrap the entire section from this h3 to this p tag into a new div. So let's cut this out. And then let's call the div services __ container. Right, let's paste that in here. Now this is going to be the container for the 3 blocks that we have right here. So this whole thing is going to be one container, okay? From there to there. So in our main page, we only have one of these, but we are going to duplicate this once we have styling in place. Okay, so now back in the editor, let's again cut out the h3 and the p tag and wrap it within another div called services underscore underscore box and paste our clipboard. Now this is going to be one of the 3 mini containers. So this is one container, this is the second, and this is the third. Okay, so now here let's give this h3 a class of services underscore underscore service dash title. And I'm going to copy this, paste it here, and I'm going to change this from title to description. Perfect. So now that we've got our markup in place, we're going to add the styles. So let's take a look at the original design and see what we are trying to achieve. So here, right off the bat, we notice that the services section has a different background color. It's a very light gray. And this text right here, it's slightly bigger in size, but it's got the same line height and the same color as our generic text class, so we can use that. And then the width of this text also appears to be slightly narrow, so we're going to have to adjust the width. So next up we have this title, and I can see that this title has a bullet, this one right there. And this bullet is using our main red color, and then the title itself is using the main blue color. But both of these colors have a reduced opacity, and we can achieve that by using the RGBA function. And finally, there is a little bit of spacing between these individual boxes, so we're going to take care of that too. So let's head back to the editor, and first of all, give it a class of generic text. Press save, take a look in the browser, and there we go. It's looking good, but the text here is bigger in size. So we will adjust that in just a little bit. So now in our styles for this section, let's give this entire section a background color of a very light gray. I don't have this saved in a variable, but let's go ahead and create a variable in our variables file. So here, just below this paragraph gray, to create a variable, you start with a $, followed by what you want to name a variable. So let's call it background-2 and set it to equal a very light gray, which I want to call FC, 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 and FC. Okay, so now you need to save the file, and then in here, let's use the variable. So call it background color, and then set it to equal background number 2. Press save, take a look in the browser, and it is a very subtle change, but I'm sure you can see it. This is where it starts. So now let's go back to the editor and style this whole container from there to there, not this original box. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. Okay, so in the services file, let me close that. Here, I'm going to reference the parent class using the & underscore underscore container. Okay, now let's give this a top margin of 5 rem, just to add a bit more white space. And just to check it's working, it does not appear to have made any difference. So maybe bump it up to 10 rem, see if that works. Okay, there we go. That looks good to me. So now in here, let's open up all of the classes that we're going to style. First one is the individual box, which we called services underscore underscore box. So just like that. The second one is the service title. So services underscore underscore service dash title. And then the third one is services underscore underscore service dash description. And one more thing we need to do is we need to give this bullet a class. So here it's a span element within the title, and then we represent the bullet using the HTML entity, which is this bull right there. So let's give this a class of services underscore underscore service dash title underscore underscore bullet. What we've done here is we've gone 2 layers deep. So first of all, we make this title the child element of the services block, and then we make the bullet the child element of this title block, because this bullet lives within the title. Okay, so press save. Now back in here, Within the services title, we can actually reference the bullet. So here we can say underscore, and this represents this whole block, and then we can say underscore underscore bullet. Perfect. Now let's start with the title. So let's set the font size to 6 rem, text transform to uppercase, font weight to bold, let the spacing of 2 pixels, the color is going to be RGBA, and then it's the main blue, and then the opacity to 0.6. Okay, and then for the bullet, right here, we need to give this a color of RGBA, then it's the main red, and then we want it to be 0.6 as well. Right, press save and take a look in the browser. There we go, that looks good. Now taking a look at the original design, we can see that this title is kind of out of its flow, meaning it appears to be outside of this box container. To achieve that, we can manipulate its position using the relative and absolute positioning in CSS. So because this title is child element of this box, we need to set its position to relative. So here, let's say position, relative, and now this title's position is going to be absolute. Okay, so now let's press save and see where we are. So we need to move it across to the left and then maybe a little bit to the top. So to do that, let's go back to our file, and here let's say top to -3 rem, and this is going to drag it to the top, and then left to -3 rem as well. And we use the minus because this is going to have the opposite effect. If we didn't use minus, then this would just drag it across to right, meaning it would drag it 3 rems from across its left hand side. So now let's check in the browser, and it's completely disappeared. It's nowhere to be seen on the page, and I'm pretty sure that something's gone wrong. So let's take a look at our HTML file, and of course we made a typo. So this needs to be Sas Variables. That makes more sense. You probably caught this error, but I've just noticed it now. But anyway, let's take a look in the browser, and we can see that it's getting there. So getting back to the point of this minus, if I set this to without the minus sign, let me show you what's going to happen. It's going to drag it down 3 rem from the top, and then it's going to drag it right 3 rem from its left. So now if I reverse its position, it's going to have the opposite effect, just like that. So what's it looking like in the original design? Here we can see it's a bit more to the left, so it kind of ends in the middle of this S. But I think that's also because of the width of this entire text. So maybe if we give the text a width of, say, about 80%, but then we also need to adjust its position because the width is going to take it out of its center flow. So margin 0 auto, press save, and it has not made a difference again. I wonder why. Of course, this needs to be service description. Now it should work. And there we go. But now I notice that maybe the width is a bit too much, and let's set it to maybe 70. It should be 90 actually. So the S is right in the middle of this L, and that looks good to me. So now we also need to bump up the font size for this entire text right here. So font size, and then set it to 3 rem. And now the main thing I notice is that maybe it's a bit heavier in the font, as well as there's less line height too. So let's go back here, set the font weight to around 400, and then line height to 2. See if that makes a difference. Okay, that looks good to me. So one thing that's left now is maybe all this text is aligned to the left hand side of the container. So here, let's go back to our file, and maybe within here, let's say text aligned to left. Press save, and now that we've aligned the text to the left side, it's kind of floating here. So maybe it was a good idea to leave it to 80%. See if that works. Okay, there we go. So it's looking almost exactly like here. I think we could maybe adjust the font size a little bit just so it looks exactly like this, okay? It doesn't make a difference. It's looking good already. But here, maybe bump up the font size to 3.3 rem. Nope, that's a bit too much. Maybe 3.1. Okay, that's good. I'm happy with that. So now we just need to duplicate this entire box 2 more times so it looks like this. So back in our HTML here, let's copy it from here, the services box, to here. And then 1, 2. Now change the second one to develop, third one to deploy. Press save, take a look in the browser, and it's looking good, but in the original design there's quite a bit of spacing between these boxes. So here, instead of giving all these boxes the individual margin of 5 rem, I mean that might affect this side, the top side as well. Would it not be nice if there was a way to just select the middle element and then give it a margin of top and the margin of bottom? That way it would drag this upwards and this downwards. Well, luckily there is a way to do that in CSS, and that is to select the nth child of an element. Let me show you what I mean. Back in here, we know that this box has 3 instances. So this is the one that we want to select. To do that, we can go to our box right here, and here we can select the nth child, and then it's probably easier to show you what I mean. So now to select the box, we can reference the n% sign, and now here we can say nth child. Now within this parentheses, we can reference what number of element we want to select. In this case, it's the second element. So this is the first, second, and the third. So here we can say select the second child and then give it a margin of maybe 6 rem on top and bottom and 0 on left and right. Press save and let's see if that works. Okay, it has worked, but we could do with a bit more margin. Maybe 8 rem. Press save and maybe 8.5. Okay, perfect. That looks good to me. With that in place, this section is now complete. Next up, we're going to style this section right there. And that is going to be relatively easy because we can just use our layout classes to style this section in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at what we are trying to achieve. So here, we can see that it's just a generic section that uses the same styling for the title and the text content. So back in the editor, we don't really need to create a separate module for this section because we can just style it with the classes that we have already defined. Okay, so first of all, in the HTML, let's give this section a class of page section right here at the top. And then here, let's cut this out, open up a new div, and now we're going to wrap everything within our wrapper. So here, let's say wrapper, and then paste our clipboard. And as for the title, let's give this a class of section title, and then this one's gonna have a class of section subtitle, and then for this paragraph we're just gonna use our generic text. So generic text. Press save, take a look in the browser. That's perfect. Now let's move on to our footer, which is actually the final section of this web page. So for the footer, let's take a look at what we are trying to achieve. In the original design, we can see that it has our main blue color as the background, some padding on top and bottom, and the text is right in the middle of the section. And also this link is using our main red color, this link right there. So for this one, we do need to create a new file. So back in the editor, here in the modules, let's create a new file called _footer.scss. And now you know the drill. So first of all, we have to open up a new class, press save, and then in the styles, right here at the bottom, say import, and then it's modules, and then it's footer, and a semicolon. Now the last thing to do is to restart everything in the terminal. So here, let's kill the process and then npm run dev. And now let's switch back to our main page. So this is what we need to design. Right, so back in the editor, first of all, let's give this footer a background color of main blue. So background, color, and then it's main blue. Press save just to make sure it's working. Okay, there we go. Now back in the HTML, let's wrap everything within a wrapper. So in the footer, we've only got one paragraph tag, so let's cut it out. And then open up a new div with the class of wrapper and paste it here. Now, we don't want to use our page section or our generic text class here because A, the text content here is much different, and B, there is significantly less top and bottom padding in the footer. So we're going to take care of that in our footer file. Okay, so in this file right there, let's set the padding to 5 rem on top and bottom and 0 on left and right. So text aligned to center, and then the color of the whole thing is going to be white. So now press save, take a look in the browser, and that looks good. And now to style the actual text and the link, let's go back to our HTML. We need to first give this p tag a new class and then this anchor tag a new class as well. So here, let's set the class to footer underscore underscore text, and then here class to footer underscore underscore link. Press save. Now in the footer, to reference the footer, we need to use the ampersand sign and then underscore underscore text. Now inside of it, let's set the font weight to 200 because we want it to be light, the letter spacing to 1 pixel, and a line height of 2. And we also need to bump up the font size. So right at the top, let's say font size and set it to equal 3 rem. Now finally for the link, all we need to do here, we need to give it a color of main red. Excellent. Press save, take a look in the browser, and there we go. So comparing that to the original design, they look identical. Excellent. So with that in place, the desktop version of this website is now complete. Next, we're going to optimize the styles so that they suit every other device from a large tablet to the smallest phone screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So what do you normally do when you want to make a website responsive? You use MIDI queries. So you have to go to each element, write a new MIDI query, specify the device size each time you reference that MIDI query, and that process becomes very repetitive. So Sass provides us with a method that makes managing our queries a piece of cake. That method involves using something known as Mixins. So let me show you how they work. So in the editor, let's create a new file in the base folders and call it underscore mixins.scss. And here, we're going to write the media queries for all the device sizes that we need to style this website for. So typically, it's a small screen laptop, but that kind of falls into the desktop width. Then it's a tablet, which is like an iPad, then a large phone, and for that you have your Plus or Max iPhones or Galaxy Notes, and then small phones like an iPhone 4 or iPhone X. So to declare a mixin, you start with the keyword @mixin, and then whatever name you want to give to a particular width. So the first width I'm going for is 1024 pixels, which is the desktop. Okay, so after the mixin keyword, I'm going to say desktop, and then open up a pair of curly braces. So because it's a desktop first website, we are going to use the max width. So in here, let's say @media, then here max width of 1024 pixels. Now within these curly braces, we can reference our styles that we're going to write later with a Sass placeholder, and that is @content. Okay, so now it's just a matter of duplicating this block of code a few more times and then changing the names and the widths. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this 3 more times. So 1, 2, 3. So that's 4 devices in total. Now, this one's going to be a tablet, which is like an iPad, and they typically have a width of 768 pixels. Okay, this one's going to be a large phone, like an iPhone 7 Plus or 8 Plus or a Galaxy Note. So here, large phone, and then these devices have the widths that start with about 414 pixels. Okay, now here, this is going to be the small phones like your iPhone 4S or iPhone X, whatever. So let's call this small phone. And these have a width of 320 pixels. So with this in place, all the device sizes are covered. Now we first need to import this file here above everything else. So import, and then its base, and then its mixins, and a semicolon. So because we've created a new file, we need to restart everything in the terminal. So here, npm run dev, there we go. Now we can reference these mixins in any of our files and then style the elements for the device sizes that we've defined there. Okay, so we're going to start with the hero module right here. So first of all, let's go to the browser, and if you are using Google Chrome, then you can use the developer tools to view the website in different device widths. So to launch the developer tools, just right click on the web page and then press inspect. Okay, now here you'll see a tiny icon next to the Elements tab. So if you click on it, it's going to let you view the website in different widths through this drop-down menu. Okay, so by default it's set to responsive, but let's change this to iPad Pro. And you can see that it has a width of 1024 pixels, which is actually our desktop mixin. Now it doesn't look too bad, but we should decrease the height of this entire section by around 20 or 25%. Now back in the hero file, to access the mixin, we write the keyword @include followed by the name of the mixin. So for the 1024 pixels is desktop. Now within these curly braces is where we can write the styles. So we simply want to change the height from 80 to around maybe 60 VH. So let's say height and then 60 VH. Press save. In the browser, we can see that the height has reduced. And if we change this to 100, it's going to occupy the entire height. So back to 60. Let's also change the font size just a little bit because this needs to be on one line. So hello there on one line, and then we craft beautiful websites on one line. But right here it's on multiple, and we don't want that. So here, I'm going to copy this and paste that in the title block, because remember, here we were styling the hero section in general by just giving it a height. But here, we want to just style the title. So here, let's paste this, get rid of the height, and change the font size to 7 rem. Okay, press save. Back in the browser, we can see that it has worked. So everything else looks good. Now let's change this to iPad. So here you can see that it's 768 pixels. We need to decrease the font size for this as well as this. So let's go back to the code editor, copy this, in fact just duplicate it, and change this to tablet. Okay, let's decrease the font size to maybe around 5 rem. Press save, see if that works. Beautiful. Now let's take care of this. So I'm going to copy this part, go here. So this is where we need to style this. Here, let's set the tablet font size to around 2 rem, because remember, here is 3 rem. And we also see that it has a width of 60%. And for an iPad, that is a bit too narrow. So here, let's give it a width of 90%. Press save. Back in the browser, we can see that it's looking good, but maybe the font size is a bit too small. And we should probably decrease the width as well to 80%, and this to 2.5 rem. See if that works. Okay, that's perfect. So this entire section is looking good for the iPad Pro as well as the iPad. Okay, Now let's move over to large phone, which is this iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus. And this is where things get interesting. So let's see what we can do about that. Now let's go back to the code editor. First of all, we need to style this title. So I'm going to duplicate this, change that to large phone, and let's decrease the font size to 3.5 rem instead of this 5. And then while we're at it, let's also change the font size for the small phone and change that to maybe 2.5 rem. And while we are here, let's also take care of the subtitle. So I'm going to copy these two mixins, okay, paste them here, and then for the large phone, I'm going to give it a font size of 2 rem. So here is 2.5. I'm going to change that to 2, and I'm going to increase the width to 100% here. There we go. Now for the small phone, I'm going to reduce the font size from 2.5 to 1.5 rem. Okay, so now if I press save, oh, and by the way, this 100% width is also going to apply to the small phone, because the way Mixins work, or any media query works, is whatever you apply to the topmost device size is going to get applied to all other device sizes that are below it. So for example, here the width is 80%, and now here if we didn't change this to 100, it would stay 80% for these two device sizes too. Okay, so this is how media queries work. So now if you press save, back in the web browser, we are currently on the large phone. And if we change this to iPhone 5, which is the smallest phone, we can see that we are getting the results that we want. But A, there is too much margin between the text and the title and the text and the button. And B, this button is too big. So let's first take care of the margin. So for that, we need to go to the iPhone 6 or 7 Plus, which is the large phone. Now, back in the editor, this is where we need to adjust the margin. So you can see that at the minute is 6 rem on top and bottom. So let's copy it, paste it here, and change this to 3 rem. Press save. In the web browser, you can see that it's looking good. Now all we need to do is style this button. So let's see what we can do about that. So I'm going to copy these two styles, and then here in the button file, this is where we need to change a few styles. So first of all, let's decrease the font size because I think that's a bit too big. So I'm going to get rid of that, change the font size to maybe 1.5 rem. Take a look in the browser, and that looks good. Now let's also change the padding because it just looks a bit odd. So here, I don't think we're going to need this. In fact, just let's leave it there for now. So I'm going to copy the padding, paste it here, change this to 1, and this to maybe 2.9. Press save. In the browser, that looks good. So let's change the device size to the smallest phone. And we could maybe reduce the horizontal padding a bit further. So here, let's copy this, paste it here, and reduce that to 2.5 rem. Press save, take a look, and that's perfect. So you may notice that there is this white space just at the edge of the website. And I'll be honest, I don't know why this is there. But my best guess is that it's got to do with one of these sections, because here you can see that we have this out of the flow title and this text. It all looks a bit odd, or maybe this develop. So I'm pretty sure that once we actually style all this little white space will disappear. Okay, so with this in place, our hero is complete as far as the responsive website goes. Okay, next we're going to take care of this section about us, as well as this hero section, because remember, these two sections, they just rely on those utility classes like page section, section title, and section subtitle. So first of all, let's take care of this section title, which lives on every section of the web page. So I think they look okay on the desktop and then the tablet. They don't look too bad at all. We just need to style them for the large phone and the small phone. Okay, so back in the editor, in the section title, let's include the large phone. And then in here, all we need to do is we simply need to change the font size to 3.7 rem. And then while we're here, for the small phone, I'm going to duplicate this, change this to small. And for that, I'm going to set this to 3 rem. Okay, press save, take a look in the browser. This looks okay for almost every section, the subtitle, as well as this little line, so we don't really need to worry about that. Okay, now let's take care of our generic text. So that also lives on pretty much every section. Again, they look okay on the iPad Pro as well as the iPad. So all we need to do is add the styles for the large phone as well as the small phone because the text is probably a bit too big. So back in the editor, let's open up generic text, and in here, let's include the mixin. So the first one is a large phone, and here, let's change the font size to 1.8 rem, and then for the small phone, I'm going to change the font size to 1.6 rem. Press save, take a look in the browser. Awesome. Let's take a look at the small screen. There we go. That looks good. This we will take care of it in just a little bit, but the hero section, the about us section, and then this hero section, that's complete. I think we should also adjust our wrapper just a little bit. So let's go to the wrapper in our layouts. And here we're just going to add styles for the large phone. So include large phone. And then we need to change this padding from 10 pixel to 20 pixels. So padding 0 on top and bottom, and then 20 pixels on left and right. Press save, take a look in the browser. Perfect. Next, we're going to style this services section. So for this section, there isn't much we need to do besides changing the font size and maybe a couple of other properties. So first of all, let's take a look at how it's looking in the desktop. So here in the iPad Pro, here is where we need to start styling it. So here, inside of the service title block, let's include our mixin for the desktop. And first of all, we need to change its position from absolute to static, just so it aligns with the rest of the text. And then let's also change the font size from 6 rem to 5.8 rem. Press save, take a look in the browser. That looks better. And the reason it's not aligning with this is because of the width of this text right there. So let's go ahead and change that as well. Copy this, paste that within the service description block, and change its width from 80% to 100%. Press save, take a look, there we go. Now, it's probably a good idea to add a bit of padding on either side of this section. So to do this, let's copy this and paste that within the box, which is the individual container, this one. Okay, so here, let's paste the mixin and say, give it a padding of 0 on top and bottom and about 2 rem on left and right. Let's see if that works. There we go. That looks good. Now, I think we also need to get rid of this bullet because there's no point in displaying it on any of the smaller devices. So here, within the bullet, let's paste that, and I'm going to set its display to none. Press save. There we go. Everything is nicely aligned. And let's change its color to solid blue. Here, inside of the service title block, within the desktop mixin, let's say color, and we don't need to use the RGBA, just the normal blue. Press save, go back, and there we go. That looks good. Now let's switch to the iPads, which is 768 pixels. So I think it looks good for this device. We don't need to change anything. However, if we switch to the large phone, we could do with quite a bit of changing here. So let's go back to the editor. Inside of the service title, let's include the mixin for large phone and set the font size from 5.8 rem to 2.6 rem, or I think that might be a bit too small, 2.9 rem. Okay, now let's copy this and paste that here in the description. For the large phone, let's change this to 2 rem from 3.1 rem. Press save. Back in the browser, that looks much better. Now we could maybe do with a bit of space between the title and the text. So to take care of it, we could either give this a margin top or give the title a margin bottom. I think this is a bit more semantic, so here let's say margin bottom of 1.5 rem. Press save, take a look in the browser, that looks much better. Now let's take a look at how it's looking in the iPhone 5 or the smallest screen. So here, I think it looks good. Maybe we should increase the padding a little bit. So back in the editor, here in the box, let's include a mixin for small phone and set the padding to 1 rem on left and right. Press save, take a look, there we go, that looks much better. All that's left now is the footer, so let's take care of it. Back in the editor, in the footer file, I think we just need to change the font size for the large phone because this is where we are at the moment. It looks good on the iPad Pro, it looks good on the iPad as well, and yes, we just need to take care of it on this device size. So back in the editor, here within the text block, let's include a mixin for large phone and then set its font size from 3 rem to around 1.8 rem. Press save, take a look in the browser, and there we go, that's perfect. With that in place, our website is looking good on all device sizes, okay? So if you watched this video till the end, then I appreciate you. Thank you for sticking around. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.